to the show. This is The Force Always. My name is Diz, aka David Zammit. Let's get on with the news, views, reviews, and interviews. And if you're sort of looking twice here, closely in this region here, I had a bit of an accident yesterday. Yes, the old noggin had injured the noggin. Noggin is a slang word of nose. Maybe it's an Australian thing, maybe it's a worldwide thing, I don't know. But yes, I got some band-aids on there just protecting it for now. Just to let you know. That is sort of news because I'm a Star Wars person. That's a bit of Star Wars news. But anyway, let's get on with the real Star Wars news. At the moment, the hunt for Ben Solo, the movie that was announced that was going to happen by Adam Driver, who played Ben Solo, aka Kylo Ren, which is the same character technically, has caused a lot of sensation with the fans wanting this project to go ahead. There is, can you believe it, a petition to have this go ahead. That is making news. That is part of the news. The only other news, yet again, no news is good news. No real news with the Grogu movie, that's Mandalorian Grogu for release of 2026. And there's no news about Starfighter at the moment. That's good. There's no news. Wishingly, when the news comes about with that, whether it's leaked images or whatever it is, it can only be good. So we can just keep moving forward. Anyway, so that's the news for this summer round. Let's get into views. Views is my story idea in Star Wars, the Star Wars universe. I accept Star Wars for what it is from the start to finish. Yes, there's ups and downs. Yes, there's lefts and rights. Things, make me cringe. Things that make me proud. But I accept the story for what it is. It's still a great story. Anyway, my story idea this time around is to do with the Acolyte. The Acolyte, yeah. So there's sort of making news today, which is not a news item, but the main lead in the Acolyte, the dark side person, which I think is known as the Stranger. He was sort of viewed as a possible Sith. There's always a talk amongst Acolyte fans, and which there is part of in the Star Wars universe, but Acolyte is one of the most hated things by lots of Star Wars people. I'd say part of the Star Wars people, not maybe lots or some, is part, but I would say a very big part. And he, the actual lead actor, is wanting to do more. So my story idea is there more you could do for season 2? Well, I reckon season 2 would have been actually really, really good. It would have, if they were planning to do use certain characters in this season in a way that is not about nostalgia but about story. But having things about nostalgia is not a problem. Star Wars is filled with nostalgia, which is recognizable and not recognizable. For example, a recognizable nostalgia thing is seeing Yoda. A non-recognizable thing would be something like the used future look to Star Wars. That's nostalgia, in my opinion. But I think season 2 would be a contrast to season 1. I'm not pushing for season 2. I would like to see a season 2. I'd like to see anything from Star Wars come out because there's always something interesting about it. And I think if it was to have, a fan favorite, Darth Plagueis really sort of launch into the beginnings of his, pursuit in being the Sith Lord, or Master, ruler of the universe. Darth Plagueis, just to let you know, was the master, the trainer for the Emperor, which is technically Darth Sidious. So he was really the guy that trained the person who became the most destructive person in the whole Star Wars universe, Darth Plagueis. He was killed so far at this stage in canon, which is official by Palpatine himself, the Emperor, before he came to. Well, actually, during when he was the Emperor, actually, as he celebrated to, that he's now the ruler. He was the Grand Chancellor in the Phantom Menace, which is Episode 1. He had a celebration with Darth Plagueis and killed him while he was drunk in his sleep, and then became the only Sith, and then created his own future and existence. But I reckon, if going back to it, I think if the lead up before the juicy part of Darth Plagueis, there would be a great sort of backstory of Darth Plagueis. I think that would be a great backstory, because you want to keep. I think you could create a great Star Wars film that would suit a commercial audience and a Star Wars audience, the actual story of Darth Plagueis. I think if that was just really left alone for a cinematic release, that would be great. But a backstory of just certain things to get something explained before it gets out there would be really good. And that would be really unusual for Star Wars, because usually it goes back in time to explain things than to sort of lead into the character. For example, Darth Vader. We knew about Darth Vader way before the prequels or episode 1, 2, and 3 came out, and that was more of an explanation. But if you have an explanation before the actual event of the storyline being put out there by cinematic release, that would be great. That is my story idea. I think season 2 for Acolyte should be the wheelings and dealings of just intricate sort of things about Darth Plagueis and other characters, like Yoda was introduced at the end, very last shot of the Acolyte season 1. I think that would be great if they're ever going to do season 2. That's my opinion, which might cause controversy in the Star Wars world in itself. But anyway, let's get into reviews. Reviews this time around is something unusual again. Now, I've got many collections of cards. I actually don't have Topps trading cards. But I always collect things that are unusual, and I attempt to have and keep them in a most pristine condition. Now, back in 1999, here in Australia, Melbourne, Australia especially, KFC, which is Kentucky Fried Chicken, which is probably obsolete to the rest of the world, but we still have it. I know that in America they have Chick-fil-A, which is causing sensation, and KFC is probably very minimal over there now. But anyway, we still have KFC, which is Kentucky Fried Chicken, and I would collect the trading cards. There was 10 to collect. 10 to collect. This is pristine. Look at this. So we've got Qui-Gon Jinn. That's a collectible card. That was from KFC. That was trading number 1. Trading number 2 was Jar Jar Binks. There you go. Number 3 was Queen Amidala. And number 4 was Obi-Wan Kenobi. Number 5 is Mace Windu. Look at that. And then number 6 was a Destroyer Droid, as far as I know. It's called a Descartes droid or something like that, but that's a Destroyer droid. Number 7, I've forgotten his name, but he was a pod racer. He's an alien. And look at this. Number 8, Darth Maul. Number 9, Watto, which was the owner of Anakin Skywalker in Episode 1, because Anakin Skywalker back then was a slave. And speaking of the man, we've got Anakin Skywalker. That's 10 out of 10. I even managed to get doubles of some stuff, so they're all there. And yeah, that's the KFC Kentucky Fried Chicken collectible cards that only come out in the actual place. You got one, I think, for when you bought something in KFC. Boy, you had to eat a bit of KFC sort of in a sort of balanced manner then. But that's it. That's the collectible cards, KFC, Phantom Menace, Episode 1 cards. Now, I don't know who would have these. This is unique. And I give this I'll give this, because it's not the best type of card you can get, I'll give this an 8 out of 10. Anyway, so just monitoring the nose just in case there's any extra bleed. A bit of an accident yesterday. Anyway, so that's it. That's the review. Let's get into now the interviews, which is usually done by our favourite man, Michael from Werribee South. Werribee South is on the west side of Melbourne, Australia. I'm just going to explain this again for you. It's a bit of a, interesting area, let's put it that way. He loves it over there. Michael's always got many questions. Just bear in mind that Michael is a fan of Star Wars, but he's becoming a bigger fan of Star Wars. I'm not trying to convince him or persuade him. He's just doing it on his own. He loves it. But let's see what he's asking today. Now, he's got a range of questions. Now, these, I've gone through them. They're more opinionated type questions on my behalf, just to let you know. So let's go. How does Ahsoka's decision not to train Grogu reflect her experiences with Anakin? Well, this is more an opinionated answer from my behalf. It was more about, she had left the Jedi Order, so she doesn't really want to train Jedi in the way that the Jedi Order, when she left the Order, was conducting themselves. They were becoming a little bit forgetful about, peacemakers of the universe and becoming more like soldiers. And she was very against on fighting and stuff like that. That was Ahsoka. So her decision, I think, to not train Grogu was her thoughts about, being a warrior versus a true Jedi peacemaker. That's my opinion type of answer question. Second question from Michael from Werribee South. Ezra and Thrawn, which are two characters. Ezra is a young Jedi at the same age as Luke Skywalker, and Thrawn is a blue-faced Imperial villain, very smooth talker, really good character, but I just still to this day think he looks a bit more Star Trekky than, and nothing against Star Trek, it looks a little, the blue is a bit too out there, but, it's a part of him. Where did Ezra and Thrawn go, and what is the significance of their new location? Well, they actually went together, leaving I think it was the Rebels. It was the Rebels animation. They were in some sort of duel, and they sort of went into an unknown area. For a long time, Star Wars fans, we did not know exactly where they went, but they ended up in a very similar location. The exact location is not what is important. Is the most important, which is what Michael was talking about. The significance is they are in the similar or same location, which will create a continuing, interesting drama and challenges for them both to defeat each other in some sort of way. They weren't about killing each other. It's what each other stood for. One was Jedi, one had Imperial sort of thoughts, in a smooth manner, and it was just about the difference of opinion. But anyway, they're two great characters. Ezra sort of like a Luke Skywalker, and Thrawn sort of like the Emperor, but not like the Emperor. He was just more of a smooth, real calculating alien, I suppose. But yeah, very interesting characters. The next question by Michael is the future of the Empire, given the return of Thrawn and the Night Sisters. What is the future of the Galactic Empire? Well, that is just, something that is up to the story writers, the ones who write the actual story for Star Wars. What is the future? I think the Empire will be always known in Star Wars. It is, you got to think of Star Wars as sellable. It is a sellable point. It's a recognizable point. It's something that caused a lot of conflict in the actual story of Star Wars. So I think it will just be the future of the Galactic Empire will always be a significant storytelling piece of history, or rise up again, as they sort of were attempting to do in Episode 9, The Rise of Skywalker. That was sort of partly coming to fruition again. Anyway, the next question is, how does Ahsoka discover the truth that Anakin is Darth Vader, and how does this change her life? Well, Ahsoka actually had some lightsaber duels against Darth Vader, but partly was unaware that it was her old master. But he was very aware that he was fighting his old apprentice when he was a Jedi. That was Darth Vader, who was before that Anakin Skywalker. But she sensed it. She sensed it through sort of her abilities with the Force. Even though she left the Jedi Order, it doesn't mean she cannot sense things. She just left the actual order, but she was definitely still Force powerful. Like she had a strong connection to the Force. So she really did sense it over a little bit of time. Not much, but a little bit. And it's demonstrated, I think it was Rebels or Ahsoka itself. Ahsoka, the season 1. It was one of those two. I've not reviewed those two series many times. I do hold them good, but I just never had the time to really go right into it again and again. I've watched certain parts over and over, but not too much. Anyway, so it was using the Force, with a sensibility to the Force that discovered Anakin was Darth Vader. And then the next question is, how can Ahsoka be the most powerful Jedi in Star Wars if she was not a Jedi? How can Ahsoka be the most powerful Jedi in Star Wars if she's not a Jedi? Well, that's sort of an interesting question because how he's worded it. How can Ahsoka? Well, anyone can be the most powerful Jedi, but it does rely upon science of Midichlorian count, or known as the M count, because everyone did not like the word Midichlorian count. She could be. I don't think her count is that high, but she, it would take an extreme amount of training to become that. But I think it would inevitably not be, because she does not have that type of count. So how can Ahsoka be the most powerful Jedi in Star Wars if she's not a Jedi? She was from the series in season 1 of Ahsoka and season 2. She's not a Jedi. She seems like she is a Jedi, but she left the Jedi Order in a great episode. And I think this was back in the last season of the Clone Wars, and it was such a confronting episode. How someone walking away from the Jedi Order because their confidence was blown to pieces due to a court case against her by the Jedi, just lost confidence, and she was always not guilty, and she just walked away. So she's not a Jedi, but she still has strong connections to the Force. So yeah, that's sort of answering that question. So the next question, the last episode, now he says last night, but it was not last night. The last episode, you talked about bogans. Can you explain what this is? Well, a bogan in a nutshell would be Michael. No, look, he's not a bogan. He's just a lovable, curious human being. But anyway, a bogan is more of a character in Australia. A bit rough-edged, a bit sort of, we sort of refer to people usually in the more country, more suburban areas to bogans. People more in the city are referred more as yuppies, a bit too fancy for themselves, a bit too, rich for themselves. But bogans are the more sort of lower end of the spectrum, sort of feeling like, when they were a little bit, come off a bit rough. And when I say rough, not evil rough, I'm talking about sort of in their appearance, their sort of how they speak. And it's just that sort of lower end sort of feel. That's my opinion. I'm trying to explain what a bogan is. A bit more sort of, there's bogans that are great. You know, you could say people like Steve Irwin. He was a lovable bogan. He had a very strong Australian accent. He was more of a suburban or more country type person. Steve Irwin, that was the crocodile hunter who unfortunately passed away very young, known very well in America, and he was very down to earth. So anyone that's more down to earth, I suppose, but a bit more sort of I'll try and convey, hey, mate. What are you up to, mate? What's going on, mate? There's a bit of an accent there for you, for a bogan that possibly could exist in Australia. You know, we all have a bit of yuppiness in us, and we all have a little bit of bogan in us here in Australia. I would say the same thing over in America as well, but in a different sort of form, and we use different words. That is the show this time around. Anyway, please comment, send in your questions of anything, comment about anything. Use the YouTube messaging service rather than an Instagram, as I don't have a real Instagram for this show at the moment, or an X or Twitter or TikTok, nothing like that. Just use that, whatever you can. If you can subscribe to the channel, that'd be great, but it's up to you. But anyway, until next time, my friends, look at that nose. Keep rocking.